Thank you for coming back. I just want to now move on a little bit and look at some of the pathways to radicalisation. And just to recap, something that, some statistics I just want to share with you again. When it comes to radicalisation, to Islamist extremism, first of all, I hear a lot of stories, a lot of people talking about how it's underprivileged, uneducated, people who are living in slums who go out and become terrorists. And it's foreign policy, etc., etc., etc. I want to give you some data from the World Bank. And I'll give you some data from HJS as well. The World Bank interviewed foreign fighters in Iraq and Syria, and they found that the overwhelming majority of foreign fighters that went to Iraq and Syria to join ISIS had a higher social standing and a higher level of education than the national averages from the countries that they come from. So put that to one side. It's not true. The data does not support that. Those are ideological positions. In terms of foreign policy, that's another one that comes along. I was one of the, I don't know if actually there was 1 million people there, but I was one of the so-called 1 million people that marched in London, although I spent most of my time in a coffee shop, because I started off marching, but the march was so slow, I ended up going for a coffee and then waiting till the end and then moving. That's just the way it was. And I still sang on to the end of the march. Yeah, 1 million people marched against the second time we went into Iraq. The first time I was supportive of, 100%. Second time, at the time I wasn't supportive. I didn't really know that much about geopolitics, etc. But 1 million people marched against the Iraq war in London. Why aren't there 1 million jihadists? If foreign policy was a thing that drove people to become jihadist terrorists. The second question I'd like you to mull over is, if foreign policy is what's radicalising British, American, Western Muslims to go out and become jihadists, what has that foreign policy got to do with Muslims flying thousands of miles to Iraq and Syria and killing other Muslims and taking Yazidi sex slaves? Foreign policy is a recruiting side, and I will touch on this in a minute. But just have those two things in the back of your mind. Foreign policy is not the thing that drives people to become jihadists. I'll come on to why in a minute. Okay, so let's look at the pathways. I'm going to talk about the pathways here generically, and then on the next slide I'm going to go on to pathways for Islamist radicalisation, which sort of got into. But I really do believe that far left and far right is something that we need to be touching on. I think Antifa has been named as a terrorist organisation in Germany now. If I'm not the far left.
No,
it hasn't.
you cannot.
I read somewhere in a paper that
Somewhere.
maybe it's not Germany, maybe somewhere else, but it has somewhere.
Antifa is not a cohesive organization, so it's hard to forbid it.
I read something about it being designated as a terrorist entity.
Yeah, could be there's some discussions following the riots in Hamburg. Maybe this is
Before, maybe. Anyway, I'll come to that. But okay, so let's look at the pathways to radicalisation. And this can be what's in the middle will change. And I'll talk about what's in the middle. But the left and the right is usually the same for far left and far right as well. On the left-hand side, individuals have to have some form of grievance. Every single person in this room, when we all go to our own beds tonight, and before we go to sleep, we'll all have a problem that we'll think of. And my problem to me will be much bigger than anybody else's problem here, to me. And guess what? Probably in 2 days, 3 days, whatever, a week, that problem will be solved. But I'll have another problem next week. The point is, every single person always has, at some time in their life, or some form of problem. And grievances as a result of that. And grievances really fall into three general categories. The first one is a genuine personal grievance. Now, some of you will have heard of the lead bomber, Sadiq Khan, as opposed to Sadiq Khan, the mayor. Sadiq Khan was the lead bomber of the 7/7 bombers in London, and after the attacks, his video where he said, I'm doing this for my brothers and sisters in Iraq, etc., etc. But then he said something interesting that nobody hardly mentioned. May Allah accept my sacrifice. He felt he was going to get rewarded for it. But that's not how his journey began. His journey began, he was middle class, wore a tie to work every day. He was an educator, worked in a school. Some say he was a teaching assistant, but he was a bit more than that. He was doing a lot of class preparation time and teaching children as well. So he was sort of this weird combination of teaching assistant and teacher. And university, spoke English as his first language, integrated into the community, the wider community. But he had a problem. And his problem was he fell in love. That was his problem. He fell in love with the girl that he was courting, he was going out and had a girlfriend at university, more than three years at university, and then carried on seeing her. She was Pakistani origin, she was Muslim. He wanted to marry her. He plucked up the courage to go home to his father, because he knew what was happening in the background back at home, and asked his father if he could have permission to marry this girl. Father said no, no way. Why? Because the father had already promised him to his cousin in Pakistan, who he'd only met once or twice in his lifetime, and when they were born, a deal was done between the father and the sister that their children would marry, arranged marriage. He had a real problem. Foreign policy was nowhere in his mind. He wasn't even interested in politics. Nothing. He needed a solution. He kept pounding away his father kept saying no. What he did was, he found people in the middle here, and the lens here, in his case, was Islamism, but it can be far right or far left ideology as well. It can be fascism, if you like, it can be communism, whatever the ism is. And somebody in here, it was a group of people who in those days were part of the Al-Muhajirun network, which was Umar Bakri, and they were what they used to call in their town the God Squad. They were the, not quite jihadist Salafis, they were revolutionary Salafis. They'd gone from Hizb ut-Tahrir to Al-Muhajirun. And they were doing the dawah stalls and doing various sort of things, moving prostitutes off the road and things like that, bullying and all these kind of things. One day, he happened to talk to them, and brother, what's the problem? Brother, can you help me? My father won't let me marry my girlfriend. Is she Muslim? Yes, she is. All this kind of thing. They fed him with verses from the Quran and passages from the Hadith, the saying of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Things like, when choosing a wife, the three things you should look for are piety, piety, and piety. That's a Hadith. Doesn't say your cousin, doesn't say any of that. And he kept going back to his father, and his father thought, wow, he's quoting Islam back at me. The Quran and the Hadith. Wow, he must be right. And eventually, he gave in. And he allowed his son to marry his girlfriend from university. He now had a new family. Because I remember in my commercial sector days, reading a report. I don't know if it's still around. The Gartner Group used to be around. Sure. The Gartner Group in the 90s said that somebody is more likely to buy off somebody, 25 times more likely to buy off somebody if they've fixed a problem for them. That's a psychological reaction. He now had people who were fixing problems, and he was ready to buy more of what they had to offer in here. That was a genuine grievance. For other people, it can be racism. Of course it can be. But racism, I have racism. I remember the National Front in the 70s coming along and they used to call it Paki bashing, that's what they used to call it. And they used to come along and beat us up, we used to have to run from them until we got old enough and we all had martial arts training that when they came back, they didn't come back again. Why am I not a jihadist? Why am I not a terrorist? Why didn't I go that way? I went to CMD, I went to far left. But there are push and pull factors that will either drive people and pull them back. Another one is the partial grievance. And a partial grievance is a grievance that's based in a partial truth. Foreign policy. Every country does some things good, some things very bad. It's the way it is. It talks about the 1 million people. What they'll talk about Israel, foreign policy, design Israel as an apartheid state. They'll talk about the West backing Israel, etc., etc., etc. But what they won't tell them is that, you know, in Kosovo, further Muslim genocide was prevented in Bosnian Muslims. What they won't tell them is that the likes of Jeremy Corbyn, by the way, who I regard as far left, Corbynistas, actually signed a parliamentary declaration that there was no actual genocide in Bosnia and Kosovo. It was a Western American imperialistic plot. And it's a matter of public record. If you do a search under Jeremy Corbyn and Kosovo genocide, you'll find the parliamentary declaration signed by all these MPs. In the US, you've got Trump. In the UK, we've got Corbyn. And you've moved from Obama to Trump. And I think we've moved, I mean, it's early, but I think we've moved from one extreme to the other, where we had Obama refusing to name the problem. And if you don't name the problem, here, David Cameron, Tony Blair, etc., named it as Islamism and separated it, you know, from Islam. Obama and his government refused to name the problem for whatever reason. We can go in, you know, whatever the reason was. That meant that civil society decided that they would name the problem. Because you've got constantly people saying we're doing this in the name of Islam, 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 etc. And then say it's got nothing to do with Islam. Well, the reality is that the people who say it's got nothing to do with Islam are wrong. The people that say it's got something, it's all of Islam are wrong. It's somewhere in the middle. It is some interpretations of Islam. I call it Salafi, Jihadi, Islamist political interpretations of Islam have caused what I've been talking about, the current modern day terrorism we're seeing in the West. That doesn't mean that there isn't Shia terrorism as well, Shia extremism. I'm specifically talking about what people are talking about in the UK and the US, etc. So Obama refused to name the problem at all. I remember Trump saying that, okay, from not naming the problem, we're going to say Islamic radicalization. That's wrong as well. It's an overreaction, I believe, to what Obama's government was. Islamism is the correct word. Here we've got Jeremy Corbyn, who describes Hamas and Hezbollah as his friends. Publicly, you'll see the video, just go on YouTube, you can see it. Who described the IRA as his friends and was against the peace process in Northern Ireland. And the chilling factor is, the day that Theresa May announced the snap election here in the UK, I predicted a hung parliament, because I know her, and I know she's not a campaigner. She's never had to campaign in her life. She's had a safe seat, you know, everything's fine. She's never had to campaign. And I know that Jeremy Corbyn has always been a protest politician, and he's a very, very good campaigner. He was a hung parliament, and analysts suggest that had the election campaign gone on for another few weeks, Corbyn may well have won. So we could have had Donald Trump in the US, Jeremy Corbyn in the UK, and then the triple threat would have been, well, not triple threat, different country, that would have been possibly Marine Le Pen in France. Oh, Geert Wilders as well. There's something going on. It's polarization, moving away from extremes, and middle ground is going in different directions. So, a partial grievance, can be foreign policy, is difficult to repute because it can be used to drive people here, but then something else has to happen to bring them into the lens. I'll come on to that in a minute. Then you've got the perceived grievance. And that's a grievance that doesn't really exist. Conspiracy theories are part of that because, you know, a lot of people live in echo chambers now, you know, online echo chambers, which is my real world, here sitting here or when I'm on this. Sometimes it's difficult to actually differentiate and actually determine which is my real world. There's a great photograph of my wife and myself that my daughter took when we were travelling somewhere on the train. We're both on our phones. I'm 52, she's 50. Yeah, whatever. Both of us on our phones. And that's after I've banned mobile phones from the dinner table at home, from a very young age. But we were at it. First thing I do when I get up in the morning, I go on Twitter, I go on Facebook, I go on all this, you know. Is that my real life? I don't know. But there is one thing to say also at this point. A lot of people, you know, after the attackers, the terrorist attack in Manchester, you may have heard a lot of people say he was radicalised online. I don't know if you guys have read that. Bullshit. Bullshit. Right, I'll tell you why it's bullshit. A lot of 23 arrests that took place in Libya, we were involved as an organisation behind them quite a lot, because our president, who was a former commander of Osama bin Laden's, was also one of the founding members of the Libyan Islamic Fighting Group in Libya, and before he disavowed the ideology and theology, and he knew the guy's father, and we helped British and Libyan intelligence services get the full picture. The full picture was, he was radicalised initially at home. His father was a senior member still of LIFG, which is affiliated to Al-Qaeda. First thing, osmosis from home. Second part of it was at mosque. His father was a muezzin at mosque. A muezzin is somebody who leads the call to prayer. You should take him to mosque regularly. The mosque has on their, unless I've taken them down now, I've downloaded them, on their official YouTube channel, 8 preachers who have preached hate at their mosque, saying kill homosexuals, making statements like get filthy Jews away from me, all apostates should be killed, and the only true Muslim is somebody who's a holy warrior. Part 2 of his radicalisation, empathy, sympathy, support. Part 3 was his father took him when he was 16 to Libya to fight against Gaddafi, and he fought, and he actually joined the Al-Qaeda wing that was fighting against Gaddafi. Part 4 was he came back after the fighting for Gaddafi and he went to the University of Salford, and my son knew him. My son graduated from the university about 1.5 years ago, and he knew him sort of hi, hello, hi, that kind of stuff. And he'd also tried to recruit my son to his ISOC, the Islamic Society, which refused to name ISIS as a terrorist entity, and lots of other things as well. That was part 4 of his radicalisation. His father knew that he was potentially becoming a terrorist, took him to Libya, took his passport off him. He persuaded his father, I'm not going to be a terrorist, Dad, don't worry. Learn how to make a bomb online. That bit is true. He learned how to make the bomb online. Came back here and within days carried out the attack. Nobody goes online to buy a pair of shoes or a handbag or something, end up, whoops, suddenly becoming a terrorist. They've got to be looking for something, or somebody has to find them. This lens in the middle, and I'll talk more about that. Personal grievance. An example. A friend of mine now, who used to be a senior recruiter for Hizb ut-Tahrir, was once on a train. I think you've heard this story before. Was once on a train. He was a recruiter for Hizb ut-Tahrir then. And he saw a young woman who's wearing the hijab, identified her as Muslim, and she was brown. She had a young child with her. She was reading a free newspaper that we give out in the undergrounds and metros here. The front page of the newspaper was a celebrity who had been charged and maybe found guilty of child sexual grooming. He knew at that given moment in time, subconsciously, she must be thinking about the safety of her child, even if it wasn't at the forefront of her mind. He went, these are clever guys, he went and started and engaged in a conversation with her, saying to her, look at these role models for your children, the Western, immoral, corrupt society. You're never going to have safety for your child. Come and join our gang. The only way you're going to have safety and security for your child is if you struggle for the utopian Islamist caliphate, which will be fair and just for everyone. He's out of Hizb ut-Tahrir, she's still there. I think her child is as well. In here we have push and pull factors. And in here we have the intellectual, ideological, social, emotional and spiritual discussions, conditions and behaviours. And we have charismatic recruiters, very, very important. I talked about a charismatic recruiter, Tommy Robinson, another charismatic recruiter, Jeremy Corbyn, Marie Le Pen, the list goes on, Osama bin Laden,
I don't believe Baghdadi was a charismatic recruiter. I think it was other people that were actually doing it for him. But they have to exist. And it happens online and offline. We did a report called Jihad Trending, and Jihad Trending found that all with the exception of one person that became a terrorist, they all had contact with a real person, offline, not just online. It happens. People do not get radicalised to the full terrorist on the right-hand side, online alone. It doesn't happen. There's other factors, always people involved who do the radicalising. Very, very quick story in this space. And you mentioned France, and that's why one of our colleagues who's from France mentioned France, and the de-radicalisation programs there. I went to a prison in 2009, and even though I have ijazas in the Sawarth, Shafi and Hanafi jurisprudence, I don't look like a sheikh. I don't dress like a sheikh, I have a beard and all the rest of it. So I took somebody with me who is a sheikh, British born, law graduate, used to work for me at the time, speaks fluent Queen's English, studied at Al-Azhar University, came back. And I did the political bit and I asked him to do the religious bit. And the deputy warden said, we've got a guy who's giving us a few problems, can you go and have a chat with him? Sheikh, you go in. This guy's got an OBE for the work. He's been given an award by the Queen for the work that he did for me at the time, and the SMC, Sufi Muslim Council. And he came out, 45 minutes later, he went in the same colour as me, he came out very pale. And I made a joke, Sheikh, Sheikh, and I was having coffee and, sitting down relaxing with other people. I said, Sheikh, have you de-radicalised him? And he went like this. And I knew something was wrong. So I leant over and I asked him audibly, what's the problem? And he turned around to me and said, the guy's got a point. Okay? The guy has a point. The extremist, terrorist has a point. And he told me the story and he said, he went in with his version of theology. He said, the guy said, I'll see you with my version, etc., etc. And he tells me he won the theological argument. I believe him. Very eloquent, very knowledgeable in theology. I'm sure he won the theological argument. Then the guy hit him with the intellectual. That's it. Has it gone off? It's not working. It's not reaching. Anyway, then the guy hits him with the intellectual, the ideological, the social, and the emotional. And he had nothing. No answer to any of those things. I now have a video of the same person at a mosque when the last time, I think, when Israel went into Gaza, telling people to boycott Coca-Cola and McDonald's because every time, this is the imam, boycott, and I also lost track with him, boycott Coca-Cola and McDonald's, etc., because every time you go and buy a bottle of Coke, it's find a bullet from his Israeli units killing people in Gaza.
He's the same person who was honoured with OBE.
Yeah.
So
I have a video of him.
Does he still have that honour?
Yes. You don't lose it for that. Anyway, so I lost track of him. He went off to do his own thing. It's not always just the theological. His theology, he says he hates Wahhabis. He says he doesn't like Islamists. But he understands them, he understands the cause, and he says to me it's much wider, and by the way, anti-Semitism is the emotional button. That was his emotional button. Jews killing Muslims is what he believed, and that was his emotional pull factor and push factor, the button. But the lens in the middle is designed to do 7 key things. The lens in the middle is designed, first of all, to create the otherization. And the otherization is that everybody in that lens is of one group, and everybody who's not outside of it, who's not in that group, this could be far left, far right, or Islamist, is different and separate. The second, by the way, I just want to say something. ISIS and Al-Qaeda don't radicalize anybody. They don't radicalize anybody. They don't have time to radicalise anybody. What they do is take people who've got to stage 5 and then tip them over to 6 and 7. Stage 1 to 5 is done by care, isna, Muslim Council of Britain, ICNA, all these other groups, who create this otherization, and the next step is the collectivization. Collectivization is that everybody on the outside is all part of the Jewish conspiracy. And it's all the same. Otherwise they'd be in their gap. The third thing is the oppression narrative. This is where the Jews and Israel really comes into it. That the Jews and everybody else is oppressing everybody in the middle, but also other people who don't know they're being oppressed. If they knew, they'd be in the group, supporting them. The fourth thing is the collective guilt. That everybody is part of this conspiracy, everybody else is part of this oppression, and is complicit in the oppression. The fifth one, where it starts to get scary, is the supremacism narrative. That everybody in the middle is better than everybody outside, to the left. ISIS will play in that space a little bit, and so will Al-Qaeda, but they don't have the resources to do the otherization, the collectivization. They don't have it. And they don't do it. We monitored that. So what happened was that we monitored their official propaganda, and there's a book called The Virtual Caliphate on our website, which looks at the theory of their propaganda, and then documenting the virtual caliphate, which monitored for the month of Shawwal, at their peak, their official propaganda that came out of Iraq and Syria, and at their peak they were producing 38 unique pieces of propaganda every day. 21st century jihad. That's what they latched onto. Less than 5% of it was barbaric. Less than 5%, most of it, and otherization, all the rest of it, oppression, no. Mercy. Victimhood. Yeah, a little bit of that. Come to the land of milk and honey. Come and settle it, all these kind of things. So yeah, I do recommend reading it. It's all online, you can, on our website, you can have a look at that. When groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda and other violent groups come in, is there, what does it say, 6 and 7, to move people to the right. And 6 says, we have to retaliate for the aggression and defend ourselves. And defend everybody else, because they don't know they're being oppressed. And the 7th one is violence is the only way. That's where Al-Qaeda and ISIS kick in, and that's why he's only got 2 weeks before somebody goes from empathy to, because all they have to do is take this group of people who already believe in these 5 emotional behaviours through the lens of Islamism, tip them over. And they don't have to do that many because the numbers are growing. Capacity building. People have received, Islamist groups have received millions, hundreds of millions around the world. Australia's doing this, by the way, as well. So we're sending to Australia, and I had the same debate. They're even behind the US. I had the same debate. They said, we're happy to contain the problem. If we contain the problem, it'll be okay. Don't worry. No violence. Pull my hair out. You're making the same mistakes we've made, and the US is making, other countries are making. France is using imams to go in and try to de-radicalize people in prisons. I've advised the French government, and lots of other things, and I can tell you some of these imams are also going through the same journey, the beginning of the same journey that the imam, the Sheikh I talked about. That's the problem in France. So these 7 key, and they can be broken down into subsections as well. Move on to the right, utopia, the theological or ideological justification, revenge, and solutions to mental health. 40% of a Scandinavian country's convicted Islamist terrorists have now been diagnosed, post-arrest, and we were involved in the work, of having Asperger's syndrome, or Asperger's as some people pronounce it. I went to a presentation in DC in 2007 or 8, where somebody presented a paper from a think tank there who said Al-Qaeda are hacking medical records. Then. That was then. Looking for people to target. And if you look at a number of convicted Islamist terrorists, they have had problems. And that's the lens in the middle, and the genuine partial perceived grievances on the left-hand side, if you want to take a photo by all means. Ideological, social, spiritual, religious, intellectual. and on the right-hand side, for Islamists, it's struggle for the utopian Islamist state, the theological justification that God wants you to do it. This is what was being mentioned earlier on today, and what I responded to a little bit. They're being told the only way you can be in God's gang, it is a gang, the way I see it. The only way you can be in the Islamist God's gang is if you do this, because God will accept you if you don't, and guess what? Oh, not only will you be accepted, you'll be rewarded. That's why a lot of these people you'll hear aren't, in inverted commas, practicing Muslims. No such thing. Anybody can be a Muslim who says Shahada. In fact, as I mentioned earlier on, traditional classical scholars regarded Jews and Christians as Muslims as well. Yeah, that's the way it used to be. Not now. The modern day concept is to tell Muslims that they had only way, and just to go back in here, this bit in the middle, the bit that was talked about this morning, identity. They've created a unique, one-off, single identity for this individual, that you're in God's gang. All the other multiple, because, you know, the reason why I told the story about being a punk rocker was I had multiple identities. I still do. You know, at home I'm a father. It's part of my identity. And I have to be sometimes strict with my children. When I'm out, I'm different. I'm not strict at all. You know, some of the children have been naughty when they're younger. Now I don't. But as much. Now they're, my boys are both over 6 foot and they don't tell me off. But people have multiple identities, but they will tell them that the only identity they can have is the one in the middle, and it's God's gang. And it's the only way. And that's, I think, what David was trying to say this morning. And the response to it is to deconstruct the fact that you can have more than one identity, and that you don't have to believe in this form of Islam to be a Muslim. Okay, let's move on. Talks about online extremism. Some of these things I talked about. Increase of participation of females. You know, have you guys heard about the recent phenomenon of taking trucks and cars and driving them into people as a terrorist attack and then stabbing them and killing them? Have you heard this as a recent phenomenon?
In Israel, it's not recent.
Started in Israel.
Okay. About in 2009, it happened here with the last terrorist attack we had before, the recent one, the killing of drummer Lee Rigby. It's not recent at all. It's not. It's been going on in Israel for ages. It's been going on in other places as well. It's not recent. In the UK, it happened in 2009, 2010, somewhere around there, with the killing of drummer Lee Rigby, when he was an off-duty soldier who was walking down, and these guys drove up in a car, rammed into him, and then got a knife and started butchering him. It's not. But, you know, the sophistication of these terrorist attacks is actually going the other way. You know, everybody thought that, you know, I've seen photographs of ISIS using mobile phones, GPS, Google GPS or whatever, connecting them to missiles and guiding missiles using technology. A lot of people thought, wow, that's going to be what's going to happen here in the West. No. The attacks, especially here in the UK and where you can't get guns easily, are becoming, the sophistication is decreasing. Internet, we talked about being not an engine of radicalisation, but merely reinforcing made-up minds. That's what the internet does. This is Mark Sageman in 2008, his book, Leaderless Jihad. Social media platforms can act as engines of transformation. However, people still look for their own echo chamber. Lots of negative measures, removing the domain, filtering, blocking blacklisted IP addresses, hiding search engines, limitations. We've all heard the stories about people saying, Facebook, you should take down this, Twitter, you should take down that, etc. Well, there was a guy sitting in Mosul, he's dead now, who was from the UK, who used to issue death threats against my staff on a regular basis on Twitter. And by the time he got to his 50th account, he sort of lost interest and let him go.
Abu Said al-Baritani?
Big pardon?
Abu Said al-Baritani?
That's the one.
Oh.
That's the one. He's dead now.
Yeah, he had an amazing blog.
Yeah. He was constantly issuing death threats on Twitter against Quilliam. And so after it got to about 50 times, we got Twitter to take his Twitter, forget it. It's not worth it. The guys were banning and taking down. You're playing whack-a-mole. If somebody's breaking the law, yeah, take them down. If someone's showing direct support, material support, yes, Facebook and Twitter and all these people. But what's happening now is they're being driven towards Telegram and other smaller social media websites. Rather, what we should do, deter the producers, we should have selective takedowns, empower online communities to self-regulate. That's what we need to do. We need to improve the online media literacy in order for people to critically engage. This is where everybody comes in, because everybody has a role to play in this. If it's anti-Semitism, or if it's something else. Charles and I were just talking a minute ago and said, how can we work together? And one of the things I said to Charles was perhaps I could, should get Charles in front of people, Muslims who are on the empathy stage of anti-Semitism. They've never met anybody who's Jewish, really. Sitting on a professor who used to be Yemen. That would be great. But everybody has a role to play, and each person's role can be different. Educators here mainly, but there might be activism. But promote positive messages. It's one thing exposing, naming and shaming and exposing what people do. It's secondly, deconstructing what they say. But the third thing that people forget about, what are you selling? What are we selling as an alternative? Because even if you deconstruct an argument, unless you actually sell something else positive, right? It can be anything else, something positive, there's a vacuum. They can quite easily move back into the bad habits. Propaganda war, well, we are living in a time when there's a propaganda war. People talked about, how can we beat ISIS? Well, 2 years ago I remember sitting in a meeting with people saying, the ISIS video, how professional it is, isn't it? Hollywood style. For God's sake, get past that. We have people in our civil society now, people like, MNC Saatchis, people like other PR organisations that have been telling people what shampoo to buy for decades. Where's the public sector, private sector, education sector partnerships? It's starting, by the way. That's what we were saying at the time. Let's get this civil society galvanised. People talked about, the ideas and just focusing on the ideas and narratives, we risk making the same mistake. I talked about the alternative. We're going to ask better questions. Why is it that these groups, and now I'm going to expand this to a triple threat, why is it that the groups from the triple threat are able to create this polarisation online? And Charles, you might remember 2 or 3 years ago when we met in an evening session, and I talked about this graph, I grew about nutting. Do you remember that? So I've destroyed this graph. So about 2 years ago, I remember providing an intervention. It wasn't my session. And somebody was talking about propaganda war. I said this 2 or 3 years ago. And I said that if we have a baseline here of values, these values can be human rights, they can be pluralism, they can be a whole bunch of things. All things that most of us in this room would say are things that we aspire to. On the left-hand side, let's look at nuttiness or craziness. This can be far left, far right, whatever. Right now, on this side of the graph, this is what we've got. But what I said in that meeting 2 or 3 years ago is, that's what we've got on the right-hand side. I took a deliberate decision to change Quilliam 2.5 years ago from just being an academic think tank to an organisation. We now call ourselves a counter-extremism organisation, not a think tank anymore. We still do the academic research, but we want to work in this area. We want to work in the political, policy, and media, and grassroots. If we just produce academic reports, which we used to do a lot, and we still do, how are people going to read them? How do we take those academic reports, research, etc., and filter them down into, what we say within the office, a fatwa in 140 characters? A fatwa, edict, whatever, point we want to make. I used to read a lot. I was a prolific reader when I was younger. Starting from when I was very young to Blighton, all the way to some very complicated philosophy books and lots of a whole bunch of stuff. Now I have a problem reading something that's more than 2 pages long. New culture. That's the way it is. I have a problem because I'm too busy. You know, I'd rather get somebody else to read something. So Sebastian Gorka, who works for Donald Trump, when he was given his position, I needed to know what he thought. So I didn't read his book. I got one of my staff to read his book and then give me a 2-page synopsis. I don't have the time. So how do we get message? And these people, they know what they're doing. They're getting galvanized using social media, and whether it's far right, or whether it's far left, or whether it's Islamism, whatever, that's what's missing. And people on the left, and this is a graph I put up 2 years ago to say people have been pulled that way, we need to increase that, otherwise that's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Guess what? That has got bigger and bigger and bigger in 2 years ago. The middle is going that way. To whatever position they want to take in the triple threat and variations thereof. It's a problem. Until we figure that, until the centrist, the middle ground, slightly right of centre, slightly left of centre, whatever it is, or bang in the middle of you, happen to be bang in the middle of you, very fortunate that you are. Until we figure out how to increase that, academia has a role to play, social media has a role, a whole bunch of things have a role to play. We're not going to find the solution until that gets bigger and bigger, and positive message through these 3 areas. And that's why I moved the organisation away from the think tank to a children's organisation. So that's something that we need to do. By the way, these slides are available, and Charles can pass them on. Talks about the ISIS propaganda in the virtual caliphate. Utopian narrative is the key message from ISIS that I mentioned. Why is it effective? Because it's broad. It catches many, many different targets. It's not as focused as we think it is. And I'll come on to solutions in a minute. It's anti-establishment. I wrote this slide 2 years ago. This particular slide was written 2 years ago, that it's anti-establishment when there's a general societal malaise about the state of the establishment. 2 years on, Trump, I actually quite like Macron in terms of, I'd like him to be my hero. He's taken the system on, he's beaten the system, hopefully in a positive way. Trump and Quilliam and some of the others, well, it's a different, anything can happen. I didn't believe that we'd leave Europe. Brexit would be the way it was. Even though I predicted it, I really, in my heart, didn't believe that it would happen. But it happened. We're not winning this battle in the middle. And again, you know, they will use Islamic motives, they will use technology we talked about, and I talked about ISIS doesn't radicalise per se. They're taking other people's hard work and then feeding off the back of it. So, do you want to please do give these slides to target audiences, encounter communications need to start earlier, need to understand the target audience, focused and work better together. Different partnerships, you know, technology, think tanks, advertisers, very, very key. Finally, is that the last slide? I might have moved around after that. Okay. Summarise, building resilience is the key. I don't believe, I'll reiterate, that anybody in this room has the specialist expertise. Certainly within Islamism, you may have in your other roles in the far left and the far right. And I hope you do have, because I don't know, de-radicalising people who've been radicalised. That's not, I believe, the role. I think the role, you do have some overlap in rehabilitation, but more than that, critical thinking. Producing critical thinking skills is what everybody in this room, I'm assuming everybody here is an educator. Yep. That's where really you can add value. Another very quick story, and very quick story. I said that the lens in the middle was the gang. Let's see where I got that. I call it the Global Muslim Ummah gang. Okay. And I'll see where I got that story, where that name from. I generally don't share that, but usually I don't. So, my wife is an educator, she's a teacher in a primary school. And the headmistress at the time called, a few years ago, called me and Haras, can you help me? We've got a problem. And I thought, well, Yvonne hardly ever calls me, and you know, I meet her at Christmas and various things, socialising. Her husband used to teach me at school when I was at middle school. and she wouldn't call me on my phone unless there was something serious. So I was in the school that afternoon. What's the point? She said, there are a bunch of 9-year-olds, so the school in those days was like 40–50% of the population of the kids there were Muslim. It was a big warning. And she said that there's a group of kids, happens to be Muslim, who formed what they call the Global Muslim Ummah Gang, and they're going around beating up other kids because they're not part of the gang. They're gaffers, and they're this, and they're that, all the rest of it. Zionists was a word she mentioned. All these things that they don't even know what they mean. They're 9-year-olds, throwing all these words that they've heard. And they stopped the kids and asked them why they were doing it, etc. And the kid said, it's to do with our religion. And guess what? The Islamophobia alert went up in her mind. I don't want to do something that could cause, she thought, I don't want to do something that could cause the council, who she reports into, and the trustees, etc., to be accused of Islamophobia. So she better call a Muslim in who can help. You know, the counterbalance, the Muslim. But she knew me, and she knew. So I said, so okay, let's have a look at this. Have you spoken to the children? She said, yes. I said, what would you do if this was racism? Now, we know what we would do then. Okay, talk me through what you would do. I knew what the answers were. Okay, the first thing we would do is we would log this as a racist incident. Because you have to by law. You didn't by then for prevent. Now you do. Off the back of this story. Then log it. Are you sure? Yeah, log it. Log it as an attack that is based on xenophobia. Fine. What would you do next if it was a racist attack or incident? We would speak to the children. Have you spoken to the children? Yeah, we've done that one. Great. Fine. Okay. We told you it was Islam, our religious duty, that's why you called me in. What would you do if this was a racist incident next? What would we call the parents in? Have you called the parents in and discussed it with them? No. Why not? Because we wanted to speak to you first. Is it really in the religion that they have to do this? This is a headmistress, a very educated headmistress. You know, a senior, one of the best primary school headmistresses I've had the pleasure of knowing. She's retired. I said, okay, let's call the parents in. Get the parents in. Well, they're coming to pick the children up in half an hour, whatever. Fine, I'll wait, hang around. Got the parents in. Discussed it with the parents. Parents were appalled. I knew they would be. Parents were appalled. What next? Use critical thinking, critical inquiry, activities and skills to help persuade these people that they're on the wrong path. And that's what they did. It's not rocket science. But there is a belief and a danger of people saying that they're going to be called Islamophobic. So that's where I get the name of the gang from the Global Muslim Ummah Gang, what these kids used to call themselves. But we need to move past a few things. So everybody here has a role to play in building resilience. Building resilience through critical thinking, through a whole bunch of stuff that you're going to discuss. And I know you've got David Hirsch is going to do a lecture, I think tomorrow. Great guy. Some of you may have seen him from before. A lot of time from I did a lecture from the Goldsmith University where he's at, where there were 5 Muslim students or 6 Muslim students, and he expected them to give me a hard time, and 2 of them asked for a job afterwards. And all of them said they actually did come along to give me a hard time, but then afterwards thought, actually, this is right. So, but David on the far left is one of the best minds, I believe, in the country at this moment in time. And he can talk about the regressive left and far left. Building resilience through academia, through critical thinking, through activism. Let's not forget that every single person in this room can be an activist as well. If they want to be, they're allowed to be. I don't know what your conditions are for the jobs that you have. Activism is very, very important. But in terms of building resilience, we need to do some certain things. Move past the community leader model. That's real racism. That's neo-Orientalism. It's racism. You know, would you say, think about this, would you say to a Christian who's white, take us to your white leader? Or anyone, not to a Christian, would you say that? Would anybody in this room actually, who's of colour, go around to someone, take us to your white leader? In the US or here? In the US or here, yeah. Yeah, I guess. That's a valid point. You just wouldn't. So why say to Muslims, we need to engage with Muslims through CARE, through Muslim Council of Britain, through other people that come up all the time, the community leaders. Guess what? The largest Muslim organisation in Britain is the Muslim Council of Britain. At the last recent Mori or Ipsos poll, their support base had gone down from 4% to 1.9%. They claim to be the largest. I bet you if somebody in the US, interesting, was to commission a study in the US on the groups like CARE and others really do represent American Muslim countries, I bet the numbers would be very similar. And again, like you were saying, that the only times they probably even think of CARE is when this is on TV because something has happened where something xenophobic has happened or an anti-Muslim attack has happened. Stop playing faith-based identity politics. If we're going to classify people by their faith, we're going to drive them to think that the only identity they have is their faith. That's something that we need to stop doing. In a liberal secular democracy, no idea is beyond critique. However, no individual is beneath dignity. When it becomes personal and individual, that's when it's a problem. Everybody in this room has a right to critique my religion. I don't have a problem with that. Every single person has the right to critique ideas and values that they may not like or may not be conducive to a liberal secular democracy. Because guess what? The far left and the far right and the Islamists are all telling me that I have to be a certain type of Muslim who believes in a theocracy, who believes in the ISIS or Islamist world view. What's going to happen to my children? What's going to happen to my grandchildren? My children are okay, they're pretty inoculated. What's going to happen to my grandchildren? If everybody's telling you, you're not a proper Muslim unless you believe this, what's going to happen? So that's something I think we need to be... but do critique. Go ahead and critique. We didn't critique apartheid, we didn't critique other things. How would things change? Islamism and the far left and the far right are a big problem. The other one is defend our values and consistency in defending whatever values are in our liberal secular democracies. Challenge those who would drive people to theocratic positions. Recognise the nuance in labels. I've used a triple threat, far left, far right, but I'm actually going to say on my penultimate slide that even my premise is wrong. Because those labels do not necessarily apply anymore when we look at anti-Semitism, anti-Muslim hatred, a whole bunch of things. Because people's politics are moving all over the place. And on different issues, they will have fellow travellers on the far right, on the far left, on the Islamists, and sometimes in the middle. It's the world we live in right now. And our enemy's enemy is not always our friend. Very, very important to recognise. And finally, war is a deeply physical act, but ideologies are the muscle behind them. This is a quote out for Thought Economics. It's not an ideal, I'm talking about Islamism now, it's not an ideological struggle between Muslims and non-Muslims. This is a struggle between good and evil, and is not dependent on what faith or no faith you practice. If you don't take this on now, if people don't take this on, if people don't get involved in this, in whatever role they have to play, and it can be anything, you know, as long as it's values-based, you have something to add. We're going to have more problems than we have right now. That's all.
Okay, so everybody points to me and I'll put you on the list. I'm going to start off with a quick question. Going back to the estimates, that according to the British security forces, just in the UK, there's a need to monitor 5,000 to 25,000, perhaps even more, suspects or people who are on the edge of being active. And the resources just don't exist. And it's similar in France and more countries. So that's happening on the one hand. On the other hand, the Islamists, we understand that in their waging the war against the West, against democracy, democratic principles, that the more conflict they can sow, the better. The more terrorist attacks, the more there's going to be a backlash against Muslim citizens in Europe and the United Kingdom. So they're sowing the seeds for a greater conflict, which I presume will probably increase the number of suspects. So that's sort of a process that's happening, and it's a global process, and there's very powerful forces behind it. And on the other hand, we're just coming off a period of time where, and you mentioned that Quilliam Foundation was pushed out of the United States, essentially. The previous administration silenced intellectuals, research centers, think tanks that were dealing with political Islamism. And we were all saying that this vacuum that was created by the American leadership on this issue,
lack of leadership.
but they were leading,
Yeah.
was going to create a vacuum that was going to, not only strengthen, they were actually working with extremists in the Sunni and the Shia world, but was also going to, the silence was festering kind of the rise of Western nationalism, the Le Pens, the Kurt Wilders, and perhaps the Donald Trumps of the world. So now we're in a situation where we were silent and we weren't allowed to speak about this, so to speak, and now suddenly we have Trump and other sort of nationalism rising. So how, given the forces that are unleashed, the rise of European nationalism and xenophobia in the United States, the instigation in Europe and in the West of the threat of terror and actual terror. We have Syria, Turkey, migration coming. Some of the migrants have bad ideas they're carrying with them. So how do you see, given the sort of global, the macro problem and the micro problem, how do we safeguard the middle? How do we safeguard citizenship when we're being sort of put under pressure from so many sides?
I think there are 4 things that we really need to do, I think. But before we get to the 4 things, ISIS told us in Davik magazine why they want people, that's their magazine, people who don't die. They told us why they want to carry out attacks here in the West, why they want people to carry them out. And one of the key things they told us is that they want to create this polarization. They want to create this populism, nationalism, anti-Muslim hatred, etc., to drive more Muslims towards their world, the Islamist worldview. They told us that they wanted to do this, and it's happening. People forget about it. They told us they want to take people out of the grey zones. That's the word terminology they used. And the grey zones where there is nuance, everything is black and white, either with us or against us. That's the first thing to know. The second thing to note is that you're right, and I remember, I think you had me in New York in 2010, was it 11, something like that? And we had this conversation, and we carried on having this conversation that the lack of, I call it the lack of leadership, but they were the leaders, Obama's administration, who surrounded themselves with Islamists and got rid of everybody else. Even the Eid Party receptions. That was the other thing, and we said that this is going to cause a vacuum, it's going to be filled with populism. And it has been, and it has happened. It's happening in the UK, it's happening populism from the far left, and in the US we've got Donald Trump, and we've got the opposite. How do we, I think there were the 2 main things. The security services say the problem is growing, yes it is. And it's growing in the US and other countries as well. The 4 things we need to do. The first thing is name and shame what the problem is, and then isolate it from ordinary, everyday Muslims. This is the Islamist problem I'm talking about specifically. Name and shame, differentiate and isolate. Muslims need to do this, and non-Muslims need to do this. The problem, though, however, after Manchester, I had a delegation of people from Manchester come to my house, and Haras, how did we do in our response? Okay, you're good at this, you're good at this, feedback there, but now it's your opportunity to tell the world, Britain and the world, that you're not the same as them. You're Muslim and you're not the same as them. The response I got was, 1, we don't want to wash our dirty linen in public, and secondly, that we don't want to show the non-Muslims that we are weak. So there was still this tribalism going on. However, I then highlighted to them how important it is. But the first thing we need, it's a civil society problem. Actually, I'm thinking about it now, maybe they are part, but there are other Muslims that will do it, if they don't want to do it yet, and they will follow, like sheep. This is a civil society problem. And we are come to the end of that. I remember that. Civil society, and we deal with this problem like we deal with fascism, communism, the other two isms, and homophobia, racism, all the other things. There's a political ideology. Name and shame it, challenge it, etc. Second thing is we need more political consistency from our leaders. So also name and shame the problem, but actually make sure that they stay with the nuance and balance. I mean, pressure needs to be put on them. The third thing is that the CVE strategy and other counterterrorism strategies need to be revamped, refreshed. The CVE strategy that's running in the US and around the world, because that's the one, when we did the PREVENT strategy, we exported it to the US, and the US exported it to the world, calling it the CVE strategy. That version is from 2008. A lot's happened since then. A lot has changed. The current CVE strategy in the US is the strategy from 2000. It needs refreshing, it needs reviewing, and it needs the right terminology in it. It needs to say Islamism, and it needs to differentiate. And the final thing I think is very, very important is that we hold on to our values and defend them with passion. I'm not talking about lives, because again, that's what everyone says. But that's a metaphorical speaking. Whatever our values are, understand what they are. And our values are not British values, they're not American, they're values. These are human values. These are, you can call them British values if you want, but that, sounds a bit colonial, I think. But they are pluralism, democracy, liberal secular democracy, human rights, freedom of all, freedom to have religion, freedom to have no religion, fairness, all these kind of things. Defend hold the value, defend them with as much effort as you can. Final thing, we need civil society shifts on this issue. I remember when I was 7 years old, 1972, my brother took me to my first football match. It was at Manchester United at Old Trafford, and I saw Georgie Best play, and I've supported Manchester United ever since. But we had to leave 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes before the end, and I didn't know why. I was 7. And every time he took me to a game, we used to have to leave early. And so I was old enough, and he could explain it to me, that the reason why we needed to leave early was that there was a high probability that from the home fans even, because of the colour of our skin, we would get beaten up. And he'd get in trouble if his 7-year-old brother was beaten up from mum and dad. But that was why. Since then, we've had a civil society movement called Kick It Out. Kick It Out, and a subsection of that, Kick Racism Out of Football. Celebrities have been involved. Academics have been involved. Politicians have been involved. Different aspects of civil society have been involved. And the way they've got this activism out is through a combination of education and transmedia initiatives. Social media, TV, magazines, radio, t-shirts, a whole bunch of stuff. We need a counter-civil society movement to this phenomenon, which is Islamism, far right and triple threat, and why is it particularly... It should actually, to everybody in this room, it should be a worry because of values, but it also is a very worry because of, the anti-Semitism side of it as well. And it's a worry for me because they could recruit my grandson. I believe that Islamism is anti the spirit and the soul of the soul of spiritual soul of the inner moral excellence and state of ihsan within Islam. Civil society movements need to tackle this in the same way we tackle others. Sorry.
So first of all, thank you. I'm not even thanking you for the lecture, I'm thanking you for everything you do. I think Quilliam's voice is maybe the most important voice, and it's an understatement in our free world. I've been working a lot on this issue. I wanted to ask you something about the first radicalizing groups. You've mentioned some of them. You've mentioned the Muslim Council of Britain, you've mentioned many more. I wanted to ask you about a little bit of a different kind of group, like Mission Dawah. Do you know them?
I know.
I'm sure because they know of you. And Mission Dawa are radical Salafi group. They are taking after Islam for UK, but they're not. But they're all converts. They're all people who converted to Islam, to the most Salafi, even new jihadi.
They're linked to
side of
an
Islam.
Al-Muhajirin group, aren't they?
They are not linked directly, but they have a lot of people who wanted to go to Al-Muhajirin, but they weren't accepted because Al-Muhajirin was after Andrew Tudari was.
Yeah, I know the
So I don't want to get into it. The thing is that I know that they have been converting people and radicalizing them, and some of them were recruited to jihad for Syria, for Sham, and stayed there or died there. What I wanted to ask you was a little bit about the Muslim Council of Britain, Muslim Association of Britain, and Cordoba Foundation, all of them linked to Anas Tikriti, which is of course Muslim Brotherhood in its essence.
His father is the Muslim, used to be the head of the Iraqi Muslim.
Yes, he's from Iraq, as we hear from his name. Anyway, so I know that in France there is an absolute parallel of that in the face of UIF, and in Germany it's IGD, and in Italy it's UKOI. And I'm asking you now if you think that the Muslim Brotherhood was radicalizing Muslims and converts in order for, I mean, would you say they're the first link that is radicalizing?
They're the first. No, I wouldn't say they're the first, but I think they've been one of the most prolific radicalizers. If you look at, let's say the UK for example. I mentioned that, faith-based identity politics didn't happen in the UK. When the immigrants came over, Muslim immigrants came over, they came as social economic migrants, they came to work, they came to earn a living. Then we started seeing in the late 70s, early 80s, a different kind of immigration. And the immigration we started seeing initially was from places like Bangladesh. And we saw a lot of Jamaat Islami. Moinuddin Chowdhury is a name that springs to mind. Moinuddin Chowdhury is one of the founders of the Muslim Council of Britain, who has been found guilty in absentia in Bangladesh for being part of the death brigades, the Islamist death brigades in Bangladesh during the India-Pakistan War for East Bangladesh, which used to be East Pakistan. And they were Jamaat Islami and alleged to have been killing people who were not Islamist. And they took refuge in the UK, political refuge, because the new Bangladesh wanted to kill them, try them and kill them. And they've actually been sentenced to death penalty, and some people in New York as well at the same level. A lot of these guys from Bangladesh came over who were Jamaat Islami. That's the first thing. Then they started building up post the Salman Rushdie affair, mobilizing and galvanizing. And a little bit of money started coming in from the Middle East. Then in the 80s we saw a lot of Ikhwan, Muslim Brotherhood, and Muslim Brotherhood Front. Muslim Brotherhood inspired people coming into the UK and the US and around the world as well. And I count, by the way, Hamas as Muslim Brotherhood. The Charter very clearly says, as David said earlier on, they're a chapter of the Muslim Brotherhood from Egypt. They're part of it. And they started coming over. They were much more intelligent, much more sophisticated, much more professional. Guys heard of Tariq Ramadan?
Yeah.
Okay, so Tariq Ramadan, his grandfather is the guy who set up the Muslim Brotherhood, Hassan al-Banna, who you may have seen the photograph this morning. And when the Muslim Brotherhood had to leave Egypt after they tried to assassinate the was it Nasser? Nasser, yeah, it was Nasser. And a lot of them found refuge in Saudi Arabia, and they built Salaf Wahhabism was born out of having an enemy. The enemy was a colonial Ottoman Empire. So when Saudi Arabia was created, where's the enemy? What can we do? What can we do? How can we do? All these kind of things. Islamists came along, Muslim Brotherhood from Egypt came along, and they formed three organizations. The Organization for Islamic Conferences, the Muslim World League, and the World Assembly of Muslim Youth. And Go Forth and Multiply was there. Go Forth and Multiply was there, what they wanted to do. And Tariq Ramadan's father, Sa'id Ramadan, I think his name was. Sa'id Ramadan was tasked with setting up the European infrastructure, and initially he went to Switzerland, then went to Aachen in Germany, and sort of a lot of money went around there. But the Muslim Brotherhood people came into the UK in the 80s, much more sophisticated. You mentioned groups like Muslim Council of Britain, Muslim Association of Britain, etc. The Muslim Council of Britain started the Jamaat Islami organisation, heavily influenced with the Muslim Brotherhood now, and now it's still, you know, sometimes, we've not seen a Muslim Brotherhood leader yet in the Muslim Council of Britain. It's the Jamaat, it's always been the Jamaat Islami.
You won't see
You won't see it.
because it's
Yeah.
politics.
We won't see it. But the Muslim Brotherhood is very, very important for them because the Muslim Brotherhood have actually allowed them to get access to Middle Eastern funds. They didn't have the access to, similar to, well, who would be the similar organisation in the US, I guess, who is from Southeast Asia? IGNA. IGNA is, I suppose, Jamaat Islami in the US. And one of the ways they got access to Middle Eastern funding was through people from the Brotherhood and other organisations, because their contacts weren't in the Middle East, their contacts were in India, Bangladesh and places like that, and Pakistan. So what Muslim Association of Britain did was to help the Muslim Council of Britain become more sophisticated, more professional and gain access to funding. They were the brains. For a long, Dawud Abdullah, for a long time, was very influential with the Muslim Council of Britain in reforming. Iqbal Sakrani and all these other people, not very professional, he was the brains. So, to answer your question, they've been radicalising people to stages 1 to 5. Post 1970s, initially with the Jamaat Islami, then with the Muslim Brotherhood, post the Salman Rushdie affair, but then more importantly when Douglas Hurd, after the Salman Rushdie affair, said, take us to your leader, and empowered the Muslim Council of Britain as the default Muslim organisation that they would go, a bit like, you know, they wanted to create another board of deputies. The difference was the board of deputies, there's maybe those days 200,000 or 300,000 people in the UK, we had maybe 2 million. A lot of differences, too many differences. So, answer your question, stages 1 to 5, definitely Muslim Association of Britain, Cordoba Foundation, and what some of these guys did. So, Muslim Association of Britain was the official Muslim Brotherhood organisation in the UK, and then it was split off by Anas al-Takriti. There was Boom Boom Tamimi. We call him Boom Boom Tamimi because he says he wants to go, if he had the ability, he wanted to go and blow himself up in Palestine, is what he said, and then they would say, go and do it, we'll pay for your ticket, and you can go. But so we call him Boom Boom Tamimi. Him and Sawalha, Mohammed Sawalha, who is a fugitive Hamas commander, etc., etc. These guys set up a lot of these other front organisations. Currently there are in between 25 to 35 Muslim Brotherhood front organisations operating in London alone, including the recent attack that we had in London outside Finsbury Park Mosque and Muslim Welfare House. The Finsbury Park Mosque is where Sawalha and some of these others, the fugitive Hamas commander, are trustees, and the Muslim Welfare House is what we used to refer to in the 90s as the Muslim Brotherhood Europe's admin HQ. But after the attack, very, very inappropriate when people have died to say those kind of things. Without those people, the radicalisation would not have happened as fast, as efficiently as it's happened in the first 5 stages. The other groups you mentioned, they go straight for the kill. You know, Al-Muhajirin was prescribed, and they split up into a number of front organisations, etc., etc. But they're the same. There are Al-Muhajirin all but name, and we call them ISGAP.
They are.
Yeah, that's who they are. They're Salafi jihadis. Direct to Salafi jihadis, straight from 1 to 5, or 1 to 7.
Thank you so much.
So that's a long answer.
So it's fine. We have 15 minutes, so time is moving. So what I would like to do is collect 2 questions. Is that okay? So Daniel and then Lizzie.
Thank you for the presentation. My name is Daniel, I'm from Hungary. 2 very simple questions. There are some parties in Europe for the Muslim minorities, but all of them are pretty unsuccessful. They didn't even get the popular support, which is their share of the population. So why is that? There is no significant strong Muslim party in Europe? And the other question is that, would it be a good thing, in your opinion? Would it help them to integrate into the society, or it would just further polarize the Western European societies?
Lizzie, short question.
So, is the world coming to an end?
No, wait. No.
Well, you did say that things are getting worse and worse. So we don't know if it's the beginning or whether we're just starting to experience terrorism on a scale that's very, very high.
Okay. First of all, is it a good thing if there's a strong Muslim party? No. Simple answer. It will just create further polarization and division. Why should Muslims, because they happen to be Muslim, and that's their religion, why should Muslims be any different to anybody else? And they don't want to be. That's the key. The immigrants, my parents, the people who first came here who didn't come here for political reasons, didn't and don't want to be treated any different to anybody else. They want to be, they have to get on with it. Enjoy life. They don't want to get involved in this because they've got other things to do. That's the first thing. Second, I didn't answer your question about immigration. Sorry, refugees, stuff like that. Multiculturalism. Well, I think that active multiculturalism has failed because rather than what active multiculturalism in the UK post the mid-late 1990s has done is to try to promote the differences that we have. Rather, what I would have rather have liked to see, and what we need to get back to, is promote the things that we have in common, and allow us to have the differences. We all got differences. I like certain food, I support a certain football team, whatever. I do certain things that are Pakistani culturally. Yeah, but promote the things that we have to say. And I think that we need to get to, because we failed the people, the immigrants that have come into Europe and are here already. We collectively, and I include myself in that as well, we failed because we're promoting this way. I don't know what the answer is in terms of immigration, should be controlled immigration, or this, that and the other. If someone's in trouble, the human being in me says, I kind of want them to be able to get away from places where they're being killed or dying. But what I don't want to do is to have their children, not them, because they won't, they run away from oppression. Their children or their grandchildren being told, come and join God's gang, or come and join the far left, or come and join this. I'd rather be able to put processes in place to build that resilience. That's what I'd rather focus on. To answer your question, is it the beginning, middle or end of terrorism? It's not the beginning. We've been here before. Terrorism has been happening for a while. First things first, you're going to remember that between 80 to 90%, if not a little bit more, of victims of Islamist terrorism are the Muslims. And I know that it's very, very concerning when we see a lot of it. The attacks here in the UK, US and all these other places are designed to create this polarization, this removal out of the grey zones. That's all the design.
But you don't see people getting killed every single day, Muslims and Muslims, but it doesn't get covered. And then you have 12 or 2 Westerners, and it becomes a big story.
I think for me as well, and this is the sad bit. For me as well, you kind of feel for things when they're happening in your house, and I don't believe this is really bad. I like to think I'm a citizen of the world. The reality is, if something happens in London and I live in Manchester, I still have this thing of over there. But when it happens in Manchester, it's much worse. And I think this is the way life is. When it happens in our house, in our home, or whatever it is, Europe or the West or whatever. If something happens in America, I don't get as worked up about it as if it happens in London or Manchester. I don't. If something happens in France, I don't get as worked up about it as if something happens. I'm worried, I'm concerned. If something happens thousands of miles away something happens in Pakistan, I don't get worked up about it at all, hardly. That's bad, but I don't get worked up about it. My family from Pakistan. And that's just the nature of, something being on your doorstep. There is a civil war going on right now within Islam. There is. And it's not new. The civil war has been going on for a long time. And so
Yeah, so
It's only a sheep company. It's
Well,
very
more-
historical.
but more than that, it's a Wahhabi, mainstream Sunni, Wahhabi versus Shia, Shia. Everyone.
Wahhabi against Wahhabi. So
Yeah.
Shia against Qatar. Most of them are Wahhabi.
Exactly. Because they're part of the Shia plan, and they're part of part of the Shia conspiracy as far as the Saudis are concerned. So there are civil wars going on with Islam, and what we're seeing is, the ISIS, Al Qaeda, they don't want the UK, they don't want America, they don't want Australia, France, they want Hijaz. That's the first target. They want Hijaz, Makkah and Medina. Then they want Al-Aqsa. These are the places they want. And we're only being attacked, etc., because of this civil war that's going on between them as an extension to that. That's the reality of it. Let's defend our values, that's what we can do.
Any other questions?
We have something.
Any other questions?
For me, a very difficult question to answer. I teach every semester modern European history. For many semesters, I've used Universally Infidel. And the reason I use it is because it's a great story. It's well written. It gets at some of the sort of critical issues in modern Europe. And also from a kind of activism perspective, I watch Western liberals, especially female students, awaken by reading that book. At the same, and I think that, maybe when Linda Sarsour says, I stand with whatever, don't think twice if they've read that book. At the same time, I have many Muslim students, and they react not violently, or even angrily mostly, but strongly against it.
Against Iron's book, yeah.
Iron's book. I think I had a Kazakh, and I think I had an Albanian who liked it. But other than those two, many Muslim students, mostly from Maghreb actually, really don't like that book, and I feel I'm alienating them.
Okay, my advice to you, I know Iron, and we've worked with Iron to help her change her points of view on a lot of things. Don't use Infidel. Use the book that her recent book.
No.
She's changed her position completely. And that can be reflected on her evidence that she gave at the Senate committee a few weeks ago, where she said, in Infidel, she talks about Islam being the problem, where what she says in the new book, and what she said at the committee hearing, was that Islam per se is not the problem. Certain interpretations of Islam are the problem, and that certain interpretations and certain versions of Islam need to fall. That's where she is now. Now, Infidel, most Muslims will have a problem, if not all, her book, but even she's moved on. So if you want to use, she has clarified things in her new book that she wrote for Infidel. So her position has changed. Politically, and from a marketing perspective, she's still regarded as the person who wrote Infidel. And even though she's gone public a few times and accepted that her position has changed, which is a good thing. I think the changing position is a good thing. You're going to have a problem convincing people, because all they'll see is Infidel quote from the book, and then you'll be saying, well, have you read a new book? She says this, that, and the other. If you want to have that kind of physical, actually that's interesting. What you could do is use Infidel versus her new book. No, that's a journey.
Course, but yeah.
That's a journey, and takes, let's say, this is what she says there,
Yeah.
but this is what she says here. Discuss. What's happened in the middle? That's what I would do.
What's the title of the new book, please?
I can't remember what it's called.
Is it Nomad?
Is that what it's called?
Because there's one called Nomad, I'm not sure if that was...
It's the recent one, the most recent one.
There's an interview of hers that's just been published by Stanford University's website.
Okay. I haven't seen it.
Thank you for the most informative lecture. So we began with the 1980s, where the faith-based identification wasn't really an issue. Nowadays it's way more an issue. What would be the major trigger for that, and does it relate only to the Muslim community, or is it a more global phenomenon? Thank you.
I think it's a combination of a number of things. Here in the UK and globally. Globally, it's a phenomenon that petrodollars has pumped out. Recognises and identifiers
as Muslims first. That's globally, petrodollars has driven that through the amalgamation of the Islamist and the Saudi and Wahhabi and Salafi scholars and the organisation itself on a global level. In the UK, it's been laziness from governments, it's been laziness from institutes, it's been laziness from a whole bunch of people within civil society to say, you identify yourselves and you want us to treat you as this, we're going to do that. And over time, so after Salman Rushdie affair, so Salman Rushdie, I guess you all know the book, yeah. Salman Rushdie in the book, I challenged a number of people that were actually talking about at the time who were involved in Muslim Country Britain to say, how many of you actually read it? No one had read it. Not a single person that was complaining about it had read it. It was just this thing that he's blasphemous. And by the way, if you take away the last terrorist attack, which would happen outside Finsbury Park Mosque, the last 3 high-profile killings of Muslims in the UK were Muslims that killed other Muslims under blasphemy. They were the last 3 high-profile killings. That was the last 3 killings. In Rochdale, a Sufi was killed. In London, a Sufi imam was killed. And in Scotland, somebody from the Ahmadiyya community was killed. By a Sufi. Well, by Brownlee. By Brownlee. So blasphemy is becoming more and more popular. And this conversation I had with the Indian Home Secretary last week, who actually told me the Brahmins have been Wahhabified and radicalized. This has been pumped out, this faith-based identity politics has been pumped out from the Middle East. It's been picked up by people all over the world, not just the West. It's been picked up everywhere. Measure us by this. Okay, we will. Is it easier? Yes, it is. Lazy. And people have done it. The Salman Rushdie affair was a key trigger in this country.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Well, I just have an observation and would invite your comment on that. You say that in liberal secular democracy, no idea is beyond critique. However, no individual is beneath dignity. I think the problem with Muslims has been that it's the other way around. For them, it's acceptable to critique the community, but they are absolutely intolerant to any critique of the faith, which perhaps is not the case with other religions. And this is what explains as to why the other religious communities have been more tolerant to humor than the Muslims have been.
My comment to that is, again, this is a contemporary position. Read Ghazali, read Ibn Arabi, read Rumi, read all of these traditional scholars who weren't like this at all. Petrodollar has done this, has caused this. They've even closed the doors of ijtihad. They've closed the doors of reasoning. This is Saudis, it's Saudi.
But they consider themselves محدثين مجددين. يعني زي one like Yaqub Muhammad Hussein Yaqub al-Hawani, you know them, they are مجددين. They are bringing new ideas from Islam, new Islam. So they call the people to believe in that we are trying to spread.
But Islam also says very clearly, there's a concept Islam in the Quran that talks about reform. And people will revive a new form of Islam. Critical inquiry has always been a part of traditional classical Islam. It's a modern day phenomenon to take that away. So if you go to people like in India and Misri, you won't get this same response from them. You will have the kind of thing that I'm talking about. The way I'm saying, you'll say, it's a problem, how can we fix it? What can we do with that? Find certain things may not be up for negotiation for him, whatever they are. But there'll be personal things, not things that are for the community. The traditional view was be tough on yourself, but be loving and tolerant and accepting of the community. You're right, it's gone the other way, but it's been driven by certain ideologies. And that's the point, tackle the ideology, and we can tackle that concept.
Anybody else very quickly?
Okay, if I can have one quick question, would you have any recommendation on profound literature on the Salman Rushdie affair? Because I deal with the effect of arts and politics, so I would be.
So it's been a while, but I will look and get.
Thank you so much.
So, Haras, on behalf of over here, thank you for a wonderful lecture.